Chapter 1. Silence before the storm. It rained in Majorca that night. A quiet rain, not loud, just a gentle drizzle that sounded like the fingers of someone dead tapping on the red roof of the hotel. Parker Pyne sat in the reading room, the dim yellow light falling on the pages of an old newspaper. He was not reading. He was waiting. Linda Marshall did not show up for the meeting as scheduled, and Basil Westover, his young fiancé, had not been seen since the afternoon. At first, Pyne assumed they were discussing their future together. But after the clock struck 10:30, his intuition, which was never wrong when it came to foreboding, began to stir. As Pyne stepped out into the hallway, the hotel manager was talking to a doorman. Spanish, fast and furious. A name was mentioned. Basil. He stepped closer. He hasn't been back to his room since this afternoon, the manager said, his voice tense. Someone said they saw him go out to the rocky headland at the end of the bay. Strangely, no one saw him return. Pyne asked no more. He bowed his head, then turned and walked toward the bay, where there was nothing but darkness, the sound of waves crashing against rocks, and the salty smell of the sea. The wind blew through the palm trees, sighing in waves. This was where Basil used to come, a rocky outcrop jutting out into the sea, isolated and dangerous, but also the perfect place to disappear. The next morning, Basil's coat was found hanging on a small bush near the cliff. In the pocket were his wallet, cigarettes, and a handwritten note, smeared with rain. Although it was no longer legible, the signature at the bottom of the note was unmistakable BW. It was a farewell. The policeman said, "Suicide under pressure. Perhaps." Linda fainted in her mother's arms. But Parker Pyne doesn't believe it. Suspicious details. Basil was not a weakling. In his conversations with Pyne, he was indignant and stubborn, not the type to write a suicide note and jump into the sea. The coat was intact. Why would he leave everything behind? But nothing of obvious value, like a watch or a ring. Linda did not come to the appointment. She said her mother had kept her there, but her voice was lifeless. Her eyes were fixed on the sea, not meeting anyone's eyes. The mother seemed relieved. There were no real tears, just a polite, restrained woman complaint. That evening, sitting alone in his room, Parker Pyne turned over the wet, now dry letter. A few words could now be read clearly. I can't go on. Pressure from all sides. Linda deserves better. Please don't blame her. Too clean, too round, too perfect. Parker Pyne looked out the window. It was raining again. He knew this Basil Westover did not commit suicide. Chapter 2. The Strangled Dream. The next morning, Majorca was still gray, as if someone had drawn a blanket of ash over the island. But in Parker Pyne's mind, things began to clear up. Not because there was more evidence, but because he had learned something from decades of dealing with liars. When everyone else seemed equally miserable, the liars were often the quietest. And today, that person is Linda. Pyne joined her in the dining room, where her mother, as always, was waiting to supervise. Linda was still wearing a simple black dress. No lipstick, no perfume. But it was the monotony that made him feel strange. Linda, I have a few questions, Pyne began, as gently as ever. The police believe this is a suicide. I don't. Linda looked up, her lip trembling slightly. Her mother raised an eyebrow. Mr. Pyne, she said, I am not sure that an investigation outside the police is necessary. A sensitive young man, under much pressure, it is not surprising if. What if he left a suicide note with words cut and pasted from a notebook, exactly like the one you used? Pyne interrupted, his voice still gentle, but his eyes unblinking. No one said anything. Linda was breathing hard. Her hands were clenched under the table. Pyne didn't miss it. I just want to know, he continued, why you didn't come to your appointment last night. Linda, I have a headache. Her mother told her to stay in her room. Linda nodded, but her eyes said otherwise. They were evasive, escaping, as if she were holding a door shut in her mind, afraid that one careless word would cause it to swing open. Pyne stood up. I'll go for a walk. Maybe I'll stop by the Cape. They said the waves were big yesterday, but they didn't find any bodies. What doesn't match? If Basil had really fallen into the sea from the rocky headland that rainy night, the waves would have washed his body ashore, but there was no trace, no blood, no skid marks. Pyne asked the staff. One remembered that Linda's room light was on all night, but Mom's room light was off at 9 o'clock. A gardener remembered hearing an argument in the early evening, coming from the back garden, which had direct access to the rock. That evening, Pyne turned off the path that led to the cliffs. He stood there, listening to the waves. Then he found a boot print, not deep, not blurred by the rain. It must have been left after the rain had stopped, not on the night Basil disappeared. Someone has come back here, or never left. There was a crunch of gravel behind him. Pyne turned. Linda stood there. Thin coat, messy hair, sunken eyes. I can't keep quiet any longer, she whispered. The sea wind carried her words away, but Pyne had heard enough. Linda knows the truth. And the truth is about to come out. But will she tell it all? Or will the darkness hold her back again? Chapter 3. Incomplete Confession. The wind blew across the rocky headland, carrying the salty scent of the sea and the damp scent of moss. Linda stood there, clutching the edge of her coat, as if it were the last thing keeping her grounded in reality. Parker Pyne didn't push. He just watched, his eyes waiting for the truth to rise from the mud of memory. I didn't push him, Linda whispered. But I didn't stop him, either. Pyne tilted his head. So what happened? Linda nodded. Her eyes were misty. That night, Basil came to me. He was angry, frustrated, said that my mother had interfered in everything, that if he couldn't marry me, he would rather die. I was tired. I told him to go home. She shivered, then continued. But he didn't leave. He dragged me here, all the way here. Said if I didn't take back my breakup, he would jump. Pyne narrowed his eyes. And what did you do? Linda chuckled. A bitter sound, like seawater breaking on rock. I turned away. I ignored him. I thought he was just threatening like usual. But when I looked back, she was silent. Pyne said nothing for a moment. In the silence, he heard two things: the sound of waves and the sound of lies. Not the outright lie, but the lie in the choice of words. A piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. A tone in Linda's voice that made him suspicious. Si, Samasi. You said he dragged you out here, Pyne asked. Oi, contra. Oh. In the pouring rain. Linda paused. Yes, I had a coat. He didn't. He was soaked to the skin. Pyne picked up a rotten twig from beneath his feet and used it to push away the thin layer of gravel, revealing untouched earth. There were no signs of wading, no two sets of footprints, just one. Are you sure you came here that night? Linda. She did not answer. Pyne continued, as gently as if they were chatting in a tea house rather than on a cliff where a man might have died. I don't think you came out that night. I don't think Basil didn't either. It was the next morning. Linda was startled. You said, he's not dead. I say, maybe he didn't die here. Or at least didn't die by himself. New piece. A gardener remembered that the back gate leading to the coastal path was left ajar the next morning, having been locked the night before. A handkerchief, embroidered with the letter L, was found nearby, completely dry. Could not have survived the rainy night. Linda clenched her shoulders, as if the wind was cutting her skin. If he doesn't jump, then... Who? Pyne looked at her. His gaze was not accusatory, but it was not forgiving either. That's what I want to know. And I thought, if you stopped being afraid, you'd want to know too. Linda looked up. This time, there were no tears. I will help you. Good, Pyne replied, because the killer is relying on your silence to disappear. Chapter 4. Witness in the Wind. That afternoon, a gray sky cast shadows over the tiled roof of the old mansion. Inside the drawing room, Parker Pyne sat by the half-open window, tapping a steady rhythm on the armrest of his chair. Linda sat opposite, her posture as tense as a violin string at the bow. Silence reigned until there was a knock at the doors. A middle-aged man entered, brown khaki coat, wide-brimmed hat, cold eyes that seemed to cut through the fog. Who are you? Pyne asked, standing up. I am Thomas Beecham. I live at the old watch house near the headland. The night Basil Clayton died, I saw this girl standing beside him. Linda turned pale. No, I told Mr. Pyne I left before what Beecham interrupted. Before he fell, or before you pushed him. No one said anything. Pyne looked at Beecham, then pulled his pocket watch from his pocket. Mr. Beecham, please tell me exactly what you saw and when. Thomas Beecham looked at Linda as if he were guarding the gates of hell and she was about to be pushed through. About 10:17 p.m. The moon was covered by clouds, but I had an oil lamp. From the guard post, I saw them arguing. She pushed him, not hard, but suddenly. He lost his balance and slipped. Linda stood up abruptly, her chair falling back. Lies I left before 10 o'clock. I have proof the maid saw me coming home at 9:50. Pyne did not respond. He looked at the two, then asked softly, Mr. Beecham, why did you wait so long to come forward? Thomas hesitated, then replied, I left early the next morning to see my sick sister. Didn't know about her death until yesterday, when I read the paper. The name Basil Clayton reminded me of that scene. I don't know what to do. Pyne pondered. That's strange. What's strange? Linda asked. It was simple, Pyne said slowly. That night, pouring rain from 9:30 till nearly midnight. No moon, No lights. No view from the lookout to the rock. Linda turned to Beecham, her voice razor sharp. "Who are you? Who told you to lie?" Beecham pursed his lips, his eyes flashing with fear. Pyne stepped closer, gently placing his hand on his shoulder. "I think it's time you told the truth, because your lies are too thin to cover up a murder plot." New clue. Rain log from local weather station confirms heavy rain from 9:35 to almost midnight. No moonlight or visibility. A letter in Basil's room, unsent, indicated that he intended to leave the area the following day to end his relationship with Linda for good and start anew abroad. Linda gasped. He was going to leave. Pyne nodded. And maybe someone didn't want that to happen. Someone with a motive stronger than Linda. Linda muttered. "My mother." Pyne tilted his head, his eyes sharp as knives, or someone closer to her mother. Chapter 5. Confession in the Dark. Parker Pyne straightened up and walked slowly to the window, his eyes never leaving Thomas Beecham. In the dim light of the afternoon, his face was no longer the gentle smile of a happiness counselor, but the cold face of a man looking into the heart of a lie. "Mr. Beecham," he said softly, "I will ask you one last time. Who hired you to make up that story?" Beecham turned away, his voice faltering. I needed money. My wife died last year. I lost my job at the post office. A man came to me, gave me an envelope with £200 in it, told me to tell the story if anyone asked, and said if I did well, there would be more. His name, Pyne asked, not emphatic, but leaving no room for denial. Beecham swallowed. "I don't know the name, but I remember the lighter. Silver-plated. Engraved D.H. Linda was startled. D.H. That's Daniel Harberton, my mother's assistant." Pyne turned, clasping his hands behind his back. The wind outside the window whistled, a reminder that the truth was knocking at the door, though everyone tried to avoid it. "Daniel Harberton," he said, "is trying to build a case that will have you convicted. Linda. And while all eyes are on you, he will have something to gain. Maybe your mother's trust, or even her fortune." Linda gasped. "My mother has a heart condition. If she believes I killed Basil, she won't be able to bear it." Parker Pyne nodded slightly. "And perhaps that is the purpose. The trap, that evening, in Mrs. Vanderlyn's living room, Parker Pyne organized a reconciliation dialogue between Linda and her mother. But it was actually a setup. Daniel Harberton was invited in for psychological support. The room was discreetly equipped with a tape recorder. Beecham was also present and was given a replica of the envelope with money and a fake lighter. "I want you to tell the story again in front of everyone," Pyne demanded of Beecham. Beecham did so. Then suddenly he exclaimed, "Mr. Harberton, you promised to protect me. You said if I didn't tell on you, everything would be over." All was silent. Harberton turned pale. "Crazy old man. What are you talking about? Don't you remember the lighter?" Pyne held it up, turning it over. D.H. Harberton stepped back, his voice trembling. "Just a coincidence." "No," Pyne replied, his eyes unblinking. "I looked at the bank records. A large sum was withdrawn from your account on the day Beecham said he received the envelope. And Beecham had no idea who you were, unless you came in person. Truth and brokenness. Mrs. Vanderlyn sat still, her face white. Linda burst into tears, but this time it was with relief. Pyne walked out of the room, leaving the tape recording quietly spinning, and the room was filled with a newly unearthed truth. Chapter 6. Secret: The Locked Room. Parker Pyne's office was now a haven of darkness and doubt. On the table, a silver-plated lighter glinted like a silent witness, while a newly copied recording twirled. Linda sat silently in the chair across from him, her hands clasped together. She was no longer the woman who had been wrongly accused. Now she was the one awaiting a conclusion she might not want to hear. Pyne looked at her, his voice low. "Linda, there's something you're not telling me. Everything fits except one thing. Why Daniel wanted your mother to believe you killed Basil." Linda didn't answer. Her lips pressed together. But then, as if a hole in her mind had been opened that could no longer be mended, she whispered, "Basil is my mother's illegitimate child." Parker Pyne paused. "What did you say?" "I overheard it on the phone. My mother had been in love with a man before she married my father, but the child she gave birth to, Basil, was sent away to be raised by someone else, because my grandfather did not accept an illegitimate child. And you know this. I only confirmed it when Basil first came to see Mom. They intended to keep it a secret, but Daniel knew too. The envy of the substitute. Parker." Pyne sat back, the puzzle pieces now coming together. Daniel Harberton, who has always been by Mrs. Vanderlyn's side, devoted assistant, like an unofficial son. But when Basil returns, blood ties make Daniel redundant. "He thinks he'll be replaced," Pyne said. "Basil is blood. You're just a daughter. Daniel has nothing. If Mrs. Vanderlyn finds out Basil is her biological son, all the property, all the love, will go to him." Linda nodded, eyes filled with tears. "And if I were convicted, Mom would be devastated. Daniel might be the only one who could comfort her." Pyne coldly. "That's why he built the case, not for money, but for control." Final unlock. The next morning, the police arrived to arrest Daniel Harberton with overwhelming evidence, wiretaps, Beecham's testimony, and a series of forged financial documents. Mrs. Vanderlyn refused to see anyone all day, except one person, Linda. No one knows what they said in that room. Only when Linda came out, her eyes red but her lips pressed tightly together, she shook Pyne's hand and said just one sentence: "Thank you for saving my mother, not just from the truth, but from her own broken heart." Chapter 7. Darkness Sent by Mail. Mornings in Parker Pyne's office were never quiet, but today there was something strange in the air. The clock on the wall had just struck 8, and Miss Lemon entered, holding an unmarked envelope, the paper yellowed with age and cigarette smoke. "It was in the mailbox this morning," she said, placing it on his desk. Pyne glanced at the stiff, blocky print on the envelope. There was no postmark, no return address. Just 3 words written in black ink: "To Mr. Parker Pyne." He pulled out a box cutter. The envelope opened, as lightly as a knife, cutting into silence. Inside was a single, brief note. "She is not the first, not the last one. The darkness was sown long ago. No signature, no physical marks. But stuck in the bottom corner was a trace of ash and a familiar smell: burnt sandalwood." Parker Pyne sniffed, his eyes hardening. Miss Lemon, get me the Anne Blythe file. Missing in Cornwall last year. She blinked. That girl was never found. Exactly, Pyne replied. And there was a letter. There were ashes. No one understood why she would disappear in the night when everything was perfect. Dear Fee. Connection from the crack. Pyne spread out the photos, notes, and old reports on the table. Anne Blythe, 28. Personal secretary to an eccentric millionaire named Havisham. Missing from her bedroom in a cliffside mansion. No signs of forced entry. No traces of blood. No apparent motive. Just a half-burnt candle in the room and a lingering smell of sandalwood. He turned back to the anonymous letter. The handwriting was different, but the smell was eerily similar. Someone is playing a long game, he muttered. A series of hidden deaths, and each time there is a message vague, suggestive, like a whisper in the mist. Miss Lemon shyly, do you think the Vanderlyn case is part of that chain? Parker Pyne looked out the window, where the rain had begun to fall quietly. I don't think so. I know so. And perhaps, if I don't go looking for the answer, the next name on the list will be me. Chapter 8. The one who disappeared in the wind rain was still falling when Parker Pyne landed in Cornwall, a rugged land where waves and mystery seemed to have coexisted for millennia. He had no luggage, just a slim suitcase containing the Anne Blythe case file, a flashlight, and an old photograph. Anne was smiling, but her eyes were lost, as if she had heard a voice calling from the darkness. He hired a car from the little station and drove towards the cliffs where Havisham Hall stood. Like a lost soul in the mist, forgotten traces. Inside the abandoned mansion, a thin layer of dust covered the inside. Everything had been closed since Miss Blythe had disappeared. But Parker didn't search her bedroom. He went down to the basement, a place only the servants and old technical maps mentioned. The heavy wooden door led to the cellar. He opened it. Inside was a damp smell, and something else, the smell of burning sandalwood. In the corner of the cellar was a stone table. On it, a circle had been hastily drawn with charcoal. In the middle of the circle was a symbol, 3 curved lines that crossed each other like the blades of a fan. A symbol he had never seen that belonged to any religion. Parker bent down in the dust. There was a small shoe print, a woman's, but new, very new. You're still here, aren't you? Anne, he whispered, his voice unclear whether he was talking to the person or the shadow. Psychology of the invitation. That night, he stayed at the only inn in town that was still open. The landlady, a white-haired widow, was wary of the name Havisham Hall. It is a cursed place. Sir, that man Havisham always talked to the darkness. He said there was a black star shining from the ground. And that secretary, she heard the call, and then went into the mist and never came back. Parker took notes. Fischl. Have you ever heard whispering? The landlady stood still. Then she slowly nodded. On a night when the moon is not bright, we call it the headwind hour. He returned to his room and opened the file. On top was a page he had just found in the mansion's basement, now placed next to the anonymous letter. 2 different handwritings, but both used the same old brown ink and had the same habit of writing the letter G long and hooked. The person behind this is not alone. Stunning invitation. At midnight, an envelope was slid under the door. There were no footsteps, no wind. Parker opened the letter. Inside was only a single sentence. If you want to know the truth about Anne, come to the St. Mara Monastery at 3 Hercule, alone. At the bottom is the signature, a symbol, 3 curved lines like a fan repeated like a curse. Chapter 9. The Monastery of St. Mara and the Necromancer. 3 o'clock in the morning. Parker Pyne left the inn without turning on the lights. The road leading to St. Mara Abbey was dark, without streetlights. Only the sound of his footsteps echoed through the mist like death knells. The abbey was nestled behind ancient maple trees, moss-covered like rotting cloaks. The iron gate was ajar. When he pushed it open, it did not creak as he had expected. Nothing had alerted him to his presence. The place was long dead, or had never been alive. Shadow of a person behind the altar. Inside the chapel was a glimmer of light, a single candle on a stone altar. The dim light cast a painted ceiling, but not of gods. The symbols were familiar, 3 curved lines, pupilless eyes, and an inverted crescent-shaped stone pillar. A figure stood still behind the altar, not moving. "I am Parker Pyne," he said, his voice low and even. "I have come by invitation." No response. He moved forward. Just a few steps to the destination. Then the figure retreated a beat. No footsteps. As if gliding through the air. The voice came out low, but thin as wire. "You heard the call, too, didn't you?" Parker stopped. "I only hear the despair of those who have been tricked into this game. I have come to end it." Stranger's ritual. The other man turned to face the light. He was a middle-aged man, with silver hair and deep black eyes. Not a monk, not a priest. Someone who used holy robes to cover up his summoning. She came willingly. They are all like that. Lonely women. Empty souls who are easily absorbed. "And then what did you do to them?" Parker asked. Quietly, I opened the door. I didn't pull anyone in. Parker pulled a piece of paper from his coat. A letter with strange writing. "You write this to deceive them. As for me, I write for the living." The other guy laughed. A hollow laugh. "So are you ready to open your eyes to see her?" The appearance of Anne Blythe. The candlelight flickered. A screech came from behind the altar. The stone wall parted rather, it opened like a membrane being torn, and from within the darkness, a figure stepped out. Anne Blythe? It was her. The face had not changed, but the eyes no longer reflected the firelight. They were dull, like a dead fish's, but they seemed to look right through him. "You're late, Parker?" Her voice did not come from her mouth, but echoed straight into his head. A chill ran down his spine. He did not know if it was fear or something else. It felt like he was standing before something that had surpassed the human realm. The man stepped back into the shadows and whispered, "She chose, and you can't pull her out if she doesn't want to." Truth or illusion? Parker stepped forward, slowly, keeping his eyes on Anne. "I didn't come to drag you out. I came to ask you one last time. Do you want to be found?" Anne's shadow trembled. Then her eyes blinked slightly, and for the first time the light reflected in her eyes. The stone door behind him shuddered a low growl, then closed. The man was gone. Parker caught Anne as she collapsed against him. "Thank you," she whispered. Chapter 10. The Price of Returning Souls. Near dawn, a thick ash mist blanketed the roads out of Cornwall. Parker Pyne led Anne Blythe out of the Abbey of St. Mara, but each step seemed to bring with it echoes of another dimension, a place where life and death had no boundaries. Anne remembered nothing. Not the ritual, not the man in the Abbey, but her eyes. Parker noticed a change, as if a part of her soul had never really left that place. No exit. When they reached the main road, the car he had parked the night before was gone. Only the tire tracks remained, but in the wrong direction. No way, Parker muttered. A faint sound rang out. Footsteps, not one person. Many. He turned. In the mist, 4 figures were coming toward them. Steady, closer, and then clearer. They are people who have been missing in the area for the past 3 years. A girl in a white dress, her head tilted as if her neck had been broken. An old man, pale skin, bare feet bleeding. A child with no eyes. They are coming back, Anne whispered. But not for themselves. Parker gripped her hand. It felt cold. She was losing heat, as if the light inside her was being sucked back to where she had left it, the baggage of the one who escaped the dark. They ran to the old boarding house, but the door was locked. There was no landlord, no electricity. The morning paper lay on the doorstep. The front page headlined, "Anne Blythe's Body Found in a Cave, Reinvestigating the Mysterious 1934 Disappearance." Parker looked at Anne. She read the headline, but didn't seem surprised. "I may be dead," she said, "but that doesn't mean I belong to them." "No," Parker replied. "You were never dead. You were trapped your mind, not your body. And that thing still wants you back." Chase ritual. Church bells rang, but not from the monastery, from everywhere. Abandoned chapels, clock towers, even in the woods. Parker understood. They weren't just summoning the dead. They were erasing the boundaries between worlds. And Anne was the portal. "If I don't come back," she said, "they'll follow me wherever I go." He didn't speak. He just pulled a silver necklace from his pocket, an old wartime item he'd used to ward off the darkness in his dreams. Parker gave it to her. "Wear it. When they touch you, call your name. Don't let them give you a new name." "Yeah." Facing the living tomb, the murmur grew louder, as if the land were groaning. Parker and Anne were hiding in the basement of the inn. The figures were looking for them, not touching the door, not calling their names. They walked straight through the walls, smelling spirits, not people. Anne shivered. Her wrist began to change color, a silvery gray. "Parker, say your name." "I am Anne Blythe." "Bigger." "I am Anne Blythe." The whole cellar shuddered. A gust of cold air rushed in and suddenly shattered like glass. Silver light spread from the necklace, burning the shadows. Parker fell. When he opened his eyes, it was morning. Anne was still there. Her necklace burned black, but her eyes were truly alive. Chapter 11. The Survivor's Oath. Anne sat by the window. Her eyes different now. Not just a survivor, but someone who had stepped into the darkness and chosen to return. But her return did not close the gate. It left a crack, And Parker Pyne knew what had emerged from the catacombs last night was only the first wave. Secrets in ancient ritual books. At the old library of Pollensa village, Parker finds a book locked in a secret compartment behind an oak shelf. It has no author's name, no index, just a symbol, an eyeless mask. Inside is a handwritten note by a 14th century priest. We have imprisoned her, a woman with eyes that pierce the night. We call her the inverted candle. She fears no fire. She carries within her two souls, one of heaven, one of the abyss. Parker read further. A passage was marked in red wax. If she turns back, the cycle begins. The circle of blood opens, and one of us, the one who sees her, will be killed. Lost links. Parker remapped the disappearances near Cornwall over the past 50 years. All were women. All disappeared around the time of St. Mary's Day. All were found later, but no one remembered anything. He called an old friend, Professor Dorian Litchfield, an expert in metaphysical archaeology. You mentioned the soul-chasing priestess ritual. Right, my God. Pyne, what did you find? It wasn't found. It was a girl. She came back. Silence for a few seconds. Then you are being watched. The man in white, in the mirror. That night, Anne stood before the mirror in her rented room. She brushed her hair. The mirror's light dimmed and reflected another woman, dressed in a white robe, her eyes black and empty, a dry cut on her neck. Anne raised her hand to touch her face. The girl in the mirror did not comply. Suddenly, she heard a whisper, "I am you. When you forget who you are." She fell to the floor. The truth buried in the monastery. Parker returned to the abbey in the middle of the night. He unlocked the vault behind the altar. Beneath the floor were 7 unmarked tombs. On each lid was a different symbol, each symbol matching a part of the tattoo on Anne's wrist. One tomb has been broken. On the cliff is an inscription. The 8th has gone, but when she returns, all the remaining 7 will live again through her. The end opens a new order. Parker ran back to his room, calling Anne's name. She was lying unconscious on the floor, blood dripping from her ear. He helped her up and whispered, "What is your name?" She opened her eyes, opaque. "I don't know." Parker took the dagger from his pocket and slashed his palm. His blood dripped onto her forehead in an upside-down cross pattern. "You are Anne Blythe. No one else." She twitched, then gasped, and began to cry. First time, Chapter 12, The Last Marker. Parker Pyne did not sleep that night. Something inside him was wrong, a void that shook as if the truth had yet to sink in. Anne had survived, but Parker wasn't sure he was himself. The blood is not hers. Anne woke in the morning, in a room filled with the scent of herbs and candles. She saw dried blood on her forehead, but it didn't hurt. The blood wasn't hers. She picked up the mirror. On her left wrist, an unfamiliar symbol. A red swirl had appeared at some point. "Parker," she whispered, her eyes filled with panic. A deformed photo. Parker returned to his London office to look up the files on the missing and the mind cases. On his desk, he found an old photograph, a group of people entering Pollensa Abbey in 1890. The strange thing was a man in the photo looked exactly like him. Same hair, eyes, posture. Impossible. He turned the photo over. It read, "The last marker. He always comes back, even if he doesn't remember." Parker's hands were shaking. "I have been there. Memory in dream. That night, Parker dreamed of a dark room. On the walls were 7 mirrors. Each mirror was a face of himself at different ages. Vision. A broken mirror. From within stepped a figure dressed in a monk's robe, faceless. It reached out to him and said in Parker's voice, "Every time you think you are the savior, you open the door for darkness to enter." He woke up with blood on his palm. The cut from the night before had formed a red swirl like the one on Anne's wrist. Discovery in the rice jar. Anne rummaged through the cupboard in her rented room looking for her notebook. In the rice jar, she touched a hard object. It was a piece of dried human skin, engraved with symbols identical to her tattoo. Inside was folded a small piece of paper, a letter written in Parker's handwriting. "If you read this, I am no longer me. Don't trust me. When my eyes change, run. Don't look back. Bury the book I left in my suitcase under the roots of the eucalyptus tree west of Pollensa Cemetery." Anne looked into the next room. Parker was asleep. His eyes were moving behind his eyelids as if he were dreaming or struggling with himself. Voice changed. The next morning, Parker was no longer his usual self. He was too calm. His eyes didn't sparkle as usual. He said, "I think it's time to end this." Anne stepped back. "Me?" He smiled faintly. "The thing inside me has begun to open its eyes." Chapter 13. The Old Mirror. Anne did not sleep. Could not. She sat by the window, a rusty fruit knife tucked under her pillow. Across the room, Parker Pyne, or whatever had taken his form, breathed in the darkness. Each tick of the clock was like the echo of a time bomb exploding, and it was ticking towards the moment she had to choose the buried book before sunrise. Anne quietly left the boarding house. She carried Parker's suitcase, the one he always kept locked, under the roots of a eucalyptus tree in Pollensa Cemetery. Her hands shook as she dug into the soft, damp soil. The suitcase opened. No gun, no money, no passport. There was only a black leather notebook and a rusty chain of keys. She opened the book. First line, "My name is Parker Pyne. If I die, or become someone else, look for me in the House of Mirrors. But beware, it reflects not the truth, but what we deny." Mirror House. Anne follows the address in the book to a ruined structure on the side of a cliff, once a tourist attraction. Now abandoned, the Maison des Miroirs. The door opened into a maze of broken, dusty mirrors. With every step, Anne saw 100 versions of herself, some older, some with blood on her dress, some crying, one laughing hysterically with eyes as black as ink. Suddenly, a figure was reflected in the mirror with no one behind it. She turned around. No one was seen. A whisper rang out. "You're bringing him closer." Facing a part of yourself. In the center of the maze, Anne found a large mirror with no reflection. It says, "The mirror of forbidden memory. Touch it to call the truth, but only once." Anne didn't think. She put her hand up. Instantly, memories flooded back. 8-year-old Anne trembles at the bedside of her crazed mother. A hand covered her eyes in the night. A gentle voice said, "Forget it. It's easier to live like this." A figure stepped out of the darkness, dragging something that had been locked inside her for 2 decades. She stepped back, gasping. Now she remembered. The last hole. Anne left the maze empty, but one thing was clear. What was inside Parker wasn't new. It had lived in her, or through her. It's just changing hosts. When she returned to her room, Parker was waiting. Not angry, not cold, just empty. You saw it, didn't you? He asked, eyes unblinking. I see myself, Anne said, her voice like the wind through a morgue. And I see you, as I was. He smiled. Okay, excited. Now you understand. Understand what? That the controller is never the other. It is a memory we do not want to remember. Parker stood up, handed her an object, a small mirror. On it was written in blood, next time, it's your turn. Chapter 14. The second mirror never lies. Anne's hand tightened on the small mirror. The glass was cold as ice in the early morning, but it reflected nothing. No face, no eyes, just emptiness, and a sense of foreboding. Parker Pyne was gone. The room was empty. All his belongings gone as if they had never existed. She knew the game had changed sides. Now it was her turn in the maze. Unlock the past. Anne finds an abandoned library in the town of Leckwed. In a secret compartment hidden behind a bookcase, she finds an old file labeled Pyne, P, severe multiple personality disorder. Top secret file. The handwritten records reveal the patient believes that he is the one who solves other people's sadness. The main individual is repressed. A series of alternate identities emerge when memories of the death of a loved one are triggered. Recent manifestation, taking over another person's will through repeated psychological contact, inner mirror syndrome. The last page had a different handwriting, written hastily. I'm not Parker, I'm next. Anne closed the file. Her hands were shaking. The voice in her head whispered, are you seeing the truth or just another identity of yourself? Traces in the mind. That evening, Anne returned to the abandoned house where she had first met Parker. On the living room wall, broken pieces of mirror were arranged in the shape of eyes exactly like her own. Below each mirror piece is a letter, when put together, where memories begin. A rattling sound came from behind. Anne turned. A shadow stepped out of the closet. No shape. No face, just a distorted reflection of herself, like in a cracked bathroom mirror. Do you think you can bury me with a mirror? It asked. I think I could look myself in the eye. And live, replied Anne. Mirror of consciousness. She took out the small mirror, the one Parker had given her. It was no longer a mirror. It was now a door. As she held it out to the figure, the thing screamed. The mirror's surface began to suck it in like a spiral into the core of primal fear. Anne screamed, you are not my memory. You are the fear I let live for too long. She clenched the mirror and smashed it against the wall. Shards flew everywhere. Silent. No reflection. The next morning, Anne walked out to the beach. The sea was calm. No Parker. No shadow. No voice. But also, no longer reflected in the hand mirror. She knew the price she had to pay. Her memories would be kept, but she herself would not be intact. Rumor has it that a nameless woman appears at the Maison des Miroirs, doesn't speak, doesn't sigh, just sits, staring into the mirror for hours on end, waiting for someone else to come in, to find yourself. Chapter 15. The 13th Treatment. He was called Dr. Gray. No one knew his real name. No one knew where he came from. All people know is that he specializes in treating patients who disappear without ever being diagnosed. starting with a half-burned document. Gray arrives at the Maison de Miroir after an anonymous letter. If you want to understand why people disappear when they look at themselves, come here. On the table in the mirror room, he found a half-burnt diary. Day 41. She doesn't remember her name, but she tells a story about a man named Parker Pyne who made her believe that pain can be fixed. Below the last line was a bloody handprint, a fingerprint that matched Anne's profile. Psychological analysis. From the crack, Gray reconstructs the story from what remains. Parker is not a person. He is a persona created in the collective subconscious, a life therapy created by desperate people. When people believe in him, he exists. When they face the truth, he disintegrates. Anne surpassed him, but in doing so, she erased herself. Gray realized Anne did not disappear. She was just stored in other people's memories. Identity replacement game. That evening, Gray is lured into a game of mirror interview. He must sit facing each mirror so that each responding personality will reflect back at him. The first mirror shows Parker's shadow. The second mirror shows Anne her eyes are blank. The third mirror shows Gray, but it doesn't move. Then the mirror shattered, and a voice spoke from deep within his mind. You want to heal others, but do you have the courage to listen to your own voice? Reflective memory. In the mirror dream, Gray saw again a patient named Pyne hanged himself when he failed to fix his wife's psychology. A young woman named Anne goes missing during a failed therapy, administered by Gray himself years ago. An old newspaper article about a man who calls himself Parker Pyne with the face of a young Gray himself. Gray wakes up, and it dawned on him he had been Parker all along. The healer, the hurt. The next morning, Gray disappeared. The treatment room was locked from the inside. On the wall, a line was written in black ink. I no longer seek to fix the pain. I choose to live in it. The mirror room no longer reflects anyone. But every night, one can still hear a gentle tapping on the mirror, as if someone were knocking on one's own door, waiting for an answer. Chapter 16. Paintings without faces. Her name was Eliza Carr, 9 years old, with hair as tangled as severed nerves. She did not speak, but she drew in chalk, in charcoal, on every surface walls, bricks, the skin of her hands, tablecloths. Wherever there was a blank space, a faceless figure appeared. And that face always looks behind the observer. Drawings created from other people's memory. Eliza was taken to a psychiatric facility on the outskirts of London after her mother, Mrs. Carr, told police that the girl was no longer her child. The first drawing they found in Eliza's room depicted a man wearing pince-nez glasses, a gloomy smile, and holding a small mirror, a mirror that reflected nothing. A note below. He comes when Mom lies. Every time she lies, he lights up. They searched the files. No one had ever mentioned the man's name, but the features matched. Parker Pyne. R. Gilroy's assessment. Dr. Gilroy noted in the report, Elsa seems to be reliving fragments of memories that are not hers. Some of the images are exact quotes from events that have never been made public, including the death of a missing psychiatrist named Gray. When Gilroy gave her a blank face, she simply wrote, "No one is missing. They just went inside." A wrinkle in the mirror. One rainy night, Gilroy found Eliza looking into the antique mirror in the conference room. Not at her own reflection, but at the frosted surface of the mirror. She drew a circle, and inside it were dozens of faces stacked together. At the 13th face, she stopped. "This is Dr. Gray, but he is no more. He has retired into another personage. He is now called the Vicar at Pollensa Bay." Gilroy was startled. Pollensa Bay was where the last person Parker Pyne helped died by suicide. According to a closed case, the last piece of the game, the last picture Eliza drew was not in charcoal or chalk. She cut her finger and drew with blood on white paper a round glass house, surrounded by the sea. Inside was a woman in a floral dress, holding a mirror. The words written in dried blood below, "Anne hasn't left yet. She's just waiting for someone to look long enough to see herself in the mirror." Eliza disappeared that night. Oh, her room was locked from the inside. The mirror remained, but the surface had changed color, as if what was reflected in it was no longer light, but locked memories. Chapter 17. The Mirror of the Wrong Inspector. Reuben Mallory, retired for 15 years, lives quietly by a cold canal in Devonshire. He still keeps a single file in his bottom drawer, the 1972 disappearance of a little girl from Harrowfield. The file is stamped "Conclusion Missing" without a trace, but he has never believed it. Memories that refuse to die. One night, Mallory received a package with no return address. Inside is a black and white photo, Eliza Carr standing in front of a mirror. A piece of paper, handwritten in red ink. "You missed a face that year. Now look again." He shook his hand as he turned the photo over. The scribbled words seemed to have been pulled from a trance. Miss Harrowfield stood behind Eliza. Back to where everything began. Mallory follows the clues to Pollensa Bay. In an abandoned mansion, he finds an antique mirror exactly the one in the photo. Cold, dust-free, like it's been recently cleaned. He looked in the mirror. At first, it was just me, old, gray-haired, deep-eyed. Then from behind me in the mirror, a little girl appeared. Black eyes, deep as the darkness in the heart of the person who once ignored the truth. An interview without sound. The girl in the mirror did not speak, but her mouth moved. Mallory read, "Why didn't you look at me? I was there, behind the closet door. In the house, you searched 3 times. You listened to the crying, then you left." The scene changed. The mirror was now an old room with a torn teddy bear. The wall clock stood still at 3:17 a.m., the time of the disappearance. Sin has a material form. Mallory collapsed to the floor. The mirror no longer reflected him. Instead, it began to glow from within. A voice, source unknown. "Every soul left behind needs a shadow to reflect." And then, Mallory could no longer see the room around her. There is only the room in the mirror, and the little girl stood there, looking straight at him, in the void declaration. The next morning, the house was found empty. No mirror was found. But in the local police records, there is a strange note. A blood painting was found on the wall. An old man kneeling before a child. Both had no eyes. Chapter 18. A Dream That Is Not Mine. Dreams are not for one person. Miriam Vale, a dream researcher at the Institute of Mind in London, began to experience a strange phenomenon. 3 patients who did not know each other reported the same dream: an empty room, a standing mirror, an eyeless girl, a man on his knees, blood flowing from his eyes like tears. They all woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m., screaming, and couldn't look in a mirror in their house for the next 3 days. Clue from old records. While examining the hypnosis records, Miriam noticed a suspicious detail. All the patients had lived near Hercule or Pollensa Bay in the 1970s. They had no connection, except for a vague meeting with an elderly, retired detective named Mallory. But Mallory went missing a week ago. The missing persons file strangely noted bloody clothing found next to a broken picture frame. No body. An experiment reflected. Dr. Miriam decided to recreate dreams under controlled conditions. She used a deep neural sensor hooked up to the REM sleep of a patient named Thomas. 3:12. Brainwaves suddenly increase. 3:14. Body convulses. 3:17. Internal camera signal suddenly becomes heavily distorted. The only image captured is a strange, upside-down face in the mirror. Not Thomas, not anyone in the room, just a single line of recorded whispers, mixed with electric fields. You saw it. Now it's your turn. Miriam wakes up another place. After the night of the experiment, Miriam disappeared for 17 hours. The security cameras did not record her leaving the room, but in her closet appeared a small, antique mirror, behind which was taped a piece of paper torn from Inspector Mallory's diary. I see myself, but I can no longer control the image. The mirror reflects the truth I try to forget. No one sees themselves anymore. From then on, Miriam could not look herself in the mirror. Any reflective surface mirror, window glass, water showed another version of her. Laugh when she cries, nod when she was saying no. Sometimes, no eyes. Every patient who has dreamed of the girl in the mirror has fallen into a state of sleep that cannot be awakened. Doctors call it echoic sleep, when the mind is trapped in a space that does not belong to the person. Message from the other side. In the last dream, Miriam remembered clearly. She saw a young version of herself, standing in a dark pine forest. The child asked, "Do you ever remember letting someone disappear?" And then the mirror appeared behind them. The little girl stepped into it, and Miriam couldn't take her eyes off it. Chapter 19. The Mirror of the Forgotten. An outside detective, Lucas Vane, a private investigator who was fired from the police for a mental breakdown, is looking for redemption. The case of Mallory, the missing inspector, still haunts him. But this time, a newspaper story about an antique mirror being auctioned with a starting bid of $1 catches his eye. Not for physical value, but because of the name of the work, Reflections of the Forgotten. Reflections of the Forgotten. The mirror was sold by an anonymous auction house with no address, no illustrations, just a guarantee every look is a memory that does not belong to you. No one touches profile. Lucas dug through old files, Mallory's handwritten notes on failed cases, missing Kiku people in Pollensa Bay, suicides in Harrowfield, children with drawings of eyes without pupils, and especially a personal memo from Mallory. Miriam Vale is the key. If I disappear, don't trust her. But Miriam was also missing. Or rather, no longer Miriam. People who had seen her recently described deviant behavior, looking in the mirror in a dark room, muttering nonsense, asking strangers, "Have you ever looked in the mirror after dreaming about blood?" Auction in an abandoned chapel. Lucas arrived at the location coded in the auction invitation. It was an old chapel on the outskirts of London. Moss-covered walls, candles dripping down to the stone floor. There was no MC, no organizer, just 10 people dressed in black, wearing white masks, and a mirror in the middle of the shrine. No one spoke. No one bid. The mirror chooses the person. It reflects no one else but Lucas. Warning in the mirror. For a moment, Lucas did not see himself. Instead, Mallory, older and with sunken eyes, sat in a chair opposite. He did not speak, but wrote on the wall with his finger. No one dreams of this thing twice if they are still themselves. Oh. Every reflected memory is a stolen memory. If you were here, Miriam would have opened the door. Lose yourself. Lucas woke up in his apartment, but the mirror was hanging on the wall. No one remembered the auction. No one remembered Miriam Vale. No one remembered the name Pollensa Bay. Every night, Lucas sees dreams that are not his. A boy pushed down a well. A man cutting off his tongue in a mirror. A girl whispering, "Don't make me remember. Please don't." And every time he woke up, Lucas felt less like himself. The last person to look in the mirror. The last time he looked in the mirror, the reflection was gone. Only a small engraving in the corner of the frame was visible. Only those who have never had memories can see the truth. Chapter 20. Memories that are not mine. The inside of the mirror. Lucas Vane hadn't slept in 3 nights. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, strange memories flooded back, images so vivid they made his sweat turn to blood. A mother murdering her child with a silver spoon. A priest burning himself on the pulpit. A child grinning in a lab, holding a human eye. None of them were Lucas. But the mirror remembered. The mirror began to change. At first, there were faint cracks like hair. Then there were reflections of people, even though Lucas was alone. And then, he couldn't even remember his own face. Code from Miriam. An anonymous package was left outside the door. Inside was a notebook in Miriam Vale's handwriting, almost like a diary. "I can't remember when I started seeing myself in other people. There is something in the mirror, not a ghost, a memory of the dead, of the forgotten. Mallory is right. I'm the door. I open it, Lucas. If you read this, don't believe what the mirror shows you. Go to the beginning where no one has any memories." Inside the book is an address: Woodvale Mental Hospital, Erased Memory Ward 6, Woodvale, where no one is themselves anymore. Lucas breaks into the hospital. The Erased Memory Unit is where patients are liberated from suffering through partial amnesia. White walls. Patients smiling blankly. He found a room marked 6B. No mirrors. In it sat Mallory. Older, thinner, but alert. "Here you are," he said. "But do you know who you are?" Lucas nodded slowly. Mallory shook his head. "You are the memory I traded to escape." The truth should not be remembered. Mallory reveals the terrible truth. Lucas does not exist. He is a combination of erased memories, slain selves in therapy, collected by the mirror, and formed into a willful being, and you are the consequence. You are the thinking memory. You seek me because I was a part of you. Miriam opened the mirror. I walked in, and the part I couldn't stand was you. Break or reflect. Lucas returned to the apartment. The mirror was still there. 2 options. Break the mirror, the memory will disappear. Lucas 2. Look, once more, you will see the true self. Not a person, not a memory, but a synthesis of forgotten sins. Lucas put his hand on the mirror. It was cold as autopsy steel. Conclusion. The last time Lucas was seen, he was standing in front of a mirror, smiling. The police found the room empty. No mirror, no people, just a wall covered with small pieces of paper, each with a line. I remember for those who have forgotten, I am the consequence. I am a memory that no one wants to carry. I am the Satan. Lucas,